there is one thing that humanity is just cannot get enough of. It's just thirsty to get more, and that is computing, or if you wish, in its now a new, maybe sexier form, intelligence. It doesn't matter how much we would get, we will just want more.
Hi folks, James here, and welcome to the Spiro Circle, this time in collaboration with Forbes Israel. One of the things I love about this show the most is how I speak to different people about all different things. There's one area of technology that I haven't spoken about much or heard from, and that's quantum computing. Now, it may feel like it's in the far future and you've seen it in some sci-fi movie, but it's actually just around the corner. And the effects that we're feeling now in this AI era may quickly be overshadowed by some of the things that may come up in the quantum computing arena. To understand some of this better, I spoke to Quantum Machines co-founder and CEO, Dr. Itamar Sivan. He was incredibly patient with me as he discussed what his company does, building the kind of infrastructure layer for other quantum computing technologies and services. The company has raised $270 million since it was founded in 2018. And although it may feel like this technology is far away, it is the next thing that's going to hit us. So I really hope you enjoy learning about quantum machines, quantum computing, and some of the things in the future. Itamar, thank you so much for taking the time today.
It's my pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this conversation because quantum computing is not something that I'm so familiar with, and it's not an industry or a sector that I have dived deep into. So I'm going to start the episode by apologizing for any technical things that may go over my head or that I'm not completely up to date with. But I want to, before we dive into it and before we kind of explore all of the insights today, I want to hear from you directly, because a lot of people, maybe like myself, they hear quantum computing and they think of something like sci-fi, or they think of something in the distant future that they may not really understand. But you didn't build a computer, you're kind of building the infrastructure layer that they sit on. So it's a different kind of thing. What did you see early on that made you go in that direction as opposed to other more traditional routes?
Sure, and it's a great question. And first, maybe I'll make a comment for your comment, your apologetic comment for not being familiar with quantum. So first of all, I mean, you should feel comfortable. You should feel okay about that. Most people are not super familiar with the field or with the science of it, the technology, and so on. It's a little bit kind of you could say until now, it's the story of my life. I've been doing quantum for quite some time. Even during my PhD, people would ask me like to understand what are you doing there, and every time it was like, oh no, here we go again. I need to explain that once again. But now it's my job, so so I have to do it. And actually, I think I kind of improved that skill, and today I think that synthesizing what it is easier than in the past. And I think that today we do have a lot more kind of a baseline knowledge about quantum across kind of the kind of a general population. But also, I think that if we talk about this more extensively, at the end, quantum computing is to be understood in the very simple context of something that's very familiar to us, which is computing. Right, it is a new form of computing. So for your question about like why did we take kind of a different approach to tackling the quantum computing like industry, let's say, and so basically we have realized that indeed, the first thing that you need to do in order to build a quantum computer is to build a QPU. Right? It's a little bit like saying that in order to lift something, you need a very strong muscle. But obviously, if you want to lift something and you have a very strong muscle, strong enough to lift whatever you want to lift, you know that the story does not end there. You still need the brain, for example. to decide and send a command to the muscle. And then you need it to be orchestrated through the neural system all the way to the muscle so that something can actually happen, right? And so
And to
what
take that
we
even further, you also
yeah,
need the hand or mechanism to actually carry the thing that you are lifting that is
that's
being
right.
done through the brain. So to take that kind of all the way through, from what I'm understanding, there are many different areas.
Yes, 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 yes. Indeed, eventually, as we build those machines, quantum computers or quantum machines, what we realize is that these are going to be complex, multi-layer, multi-technology machines at the end of the day, right? And so basically, it's a little bit like you think about AI today, right? You think about AI, you think about practically there are so many different components and different layers that are key and are essential to in order to at the end of the day get the value delivered to the users, right? Of course, we've got GPUs, we've got networking, and we've got memories, and we've got all the entire stack from those large data centers deployed at Amazon or Azure and or whatnot, um, all the way from there into the user, right? And quantum computers are going to be very similar in the sense that it's not going to be just about a chip. It's not a chip. It's quite broad. It's quite diverse in terms of technology, and so we can go far maybe in with biological or physiological analogies. But I think that captures kind of the point here. So this realization led us to pursue this different path. And so what we realized that indeed this development of this so-called brain was addressing an unmet need. People were waiting for a company to do that, right? And as we have different muscles across the computing industry, surprisingly, this platform that we're developing is actually suitable across them all, right? So this was a great surprise for us, and so we're today very thankful for being able to work with so many across this industry.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. You've really helped me understand it, and I hope that has translated as well to the viewers and listeners. Is it safe to say that you folks are kind of like the skeleton to all of the different parts that are contributing muscles? Just if we're going to just extend that metaphor.
I think that maybe skeleton would be not the most precise term.
Okay, that's why we're here, right? That's why we're yeah.
I,
That's why we're talking.
I would stick to brains and neural systems for that. A skeleton is maybe something very essential. Like, for example, many of the quantum chips are held in refrigerators, unique refrigerators that get to basically the absolute zero minus below 270 whatever degrees Celsius. So this kind of these refrigerators, they hold these very unique quantum processors, and therefore you could call them sort of a skeleton, like the skeleton holds the whole body. So that would be a better
Gotcha.
analogy for that. And we
I'll
don't
leave
have
I'll
that.
leave the metaphors to you going forward, and I don't want to distort any of the
You can
messaging
count on me for that.
that we may be going through today. So I do want to state some business and company facts for those who may not be familiar. So you folks were founded in 2018. You've raised a substantial amount of money, $280 million in total, but 170 of that, so way more than half of that, was in around just last year. You have customers across academia, national labs, and the private sector, and you've published academic papers in quantum physics, and you were the former entrepreneurship program leader at Weizmann University. So when you were doing that at Weizmann University and the things that you were studying there and researching there, at what point did it drop for you to personally to pivot from researcher, academic to kind of a founder position, and then all of the funding and trajectory that came that way? Talk me through that pivot in your mind.
Yeah, I guess that's something that is was a quite of an interesting journey. I started my PhD at the Weizmann Institute with being quite determined to pursue an academic path, right? So since I was pretty young, I had this curiosity for I would say not broadly for science, but I developed a curiosity for physics, and then later developed into quantum. So yeah, I was pretty determined to kind of answer some big questions, fundamental questions in quantum. So our research lab was interested to prove the existence of certain quasi particles, which are very unique and could carry some very unique characteristics that have never been proven to exist. Something that's very fundamental, very very deep in science. If you would ask someone back in the days, like, what is it good for? The answer would be, I don't know, I don't care, right? So like a deep passion for just science, and to be very honest, like at some point I lost that passion. So
Why?
it's a very simple thing. Like it's sometimes you don't need, maybe the question of why is like it's something that is emotional, right? Maybe you stop loving someone, you ask why, you stop, right? So I just lost the passion at some point. Like I to be very blunt, I realized that as we were trying to prove if something is X or Y, I got to the conclusion that maybe I don't care so much.
Yeah, someone else
So
can answer the question. Yeah.
yeah, let someone else answer the question. Like I got the question. Now the hard work of answering it is not so critical for me. So, but at the time, like I was starting to be exposed to the whole like in like entrepreneurship startup ecosystem in Israel, which is quite well established and quite incredible. And to be honest, I was very very like impressed by the magic of what a startup is, right? The magic of one day having nothing, just like an idea, and absolutely nothing else, right? Just three people in a desk, and an idea, right? Just a concept. And a year later, like all of a sudden, boom, you've got like customers and revenues and products, and that's magic. I think that's really crazy. So I was really inspired by this, and these things happen more or less at the same time. So it was a pivot right away.
And that's a quick turnaround, 1 year between, as you mentioned, founding the company or ideation and kind of brainstorming heads versus, as you said, customers and companies behind you. And then I imagine kind of that's when investment started kind of piling in. I want to speak a bit more about one of the things that we discussed off this call, off this interview today, which was and this is one of the things that I love about this podcast. It's one of the things I love about my background in journalism and speaking to different founders and CEOs is I learn so much from them in areas that I just wasn't familiar with. So I'm getting that today, and I've had it in the past. And one of the things that we spoke about that made me think quite a bit was the hybrid reality and the hybrid kind of environment that quantum computing is going to have. Because you mentioned at the start of this interview that it was kind of a bit similar to AI, and there was quantum computers from computing, but then there's AI. And in my mind, at least, I've kind of been trained to identify tensions. What startup is going to destroy another startup, or what LLM is going to make people, but quantum's not like that. And there isn't really a tension. And what I understood from the research ahead of this was that it's a bit more of a hybrid collaboration. And for me personally, it was just a very different way of viewing things. So when people imagine a quantum computer, they picture something that replaces classical computing, as you mentioned. But the business is an opposite idea. So talk me through about what a hybrid system looks like? Like, talk me through what that may envisage.
Yeah. So that is indeed an important realization. There was recently an announcement by a CEO, never mind of which company, that said that if he was Jensen, he would have been like very concerned about quantum, and I think that this really kind of misses the point, right? It misses the point because indeed, advanced computing infrastructures would simply work together, right? And I mean, today what we talk about is intelligence, right? That is the form of computing that we develop today, right? And there's actually something that's extremely fundamental here, right? I mean, if you think about it, basically humanity is consuming many different resources, right? I mean, food and water, for example, energy, rare earth minerals, metals, and so on. But there's only one resource that, if I flood the world with supply, its price will not just go to zero more than instantaneously, right? Because the law says that if supply is infinite, right, the price must be zero, right? And it is
Right.
true for energy, right? Or let's say for food, if I provide all foods at an infinite quantity to humanity, they
Well,
will
that's why
have
sand is
nothing.
cheap, right?
Yes, yeah, you got plenty. So, but there is one thing that humanity is just cannot get enough of. It's just thirsty to get more, and that is computing, or if you wish, in its now a new, maybe sexier form, intelligence,
Mm.
right? It doesn't matter how much we would get, we will just want more. And there's something interesting about it, because if I give the sun level energy to humanity tomorrow, okay, oil
Well, that was
prices
what I
will
was
go.
thinking as well when you mentioned like that's an infinite amount of, or near infinite amount of energy that we're all getting for
Yeah,
free.
so if I no no no, but we're not able to capture it, right? Because
Right.
solar cells were not so efficient. But if I would magically have a plug going into the sun, and I would tomorrow have sun level energy provided to humanity, the price of oil and gas and all forms of electricity would just sink to zero. Maybe you could claim that in 10 or 15 years, someone would be able to know how to use such levels of energy, which is very unlikely, and then all of a sudden the prices will start picking up again. But the point with intelligence is that the more we have, the more we have, the faster progress, the faster we progress, right? So it's like a self progressing cycle, right? So it is self-catalyzing, if that makes sense.
100%.
So basically, if we think about Moore's law, it is only one example of this general law. Humanity cannot get enough of intelligence. Now, why am I giving you this pitch about intelligence? Because quantum computing is just a new form of intelligence, and it will plug into these intelligent machines that we're building, right? What are we doing now? What are these new data centers that we're building? These are just new forms of intelligence. What do you do all day? You talk to an intelligent machine, you talk to LLMs. That's what you do all day, right? Now you talk to me. I guess you talk to your LLM, to Gemini and Claude more than you today, more than you talk to me.
Yeah.
So,
More than some of my
and
family members.
yes. So the thing is that, and there's no way back. There's no way back. What we're dealing with now is building more powerful, bigger forms of intelligence, artificial intelligence. And when we plug quantum into it, it will just be a more intelligent machine for different reasons and ways, which might be too technical for the audience today. But so this realization, which you presented in your question, is like super obvious is not obvious, and it took us some time to understand. We understood it gradually. We're still kind of understanding it further and further as quantum progresses, but also as AI progresses, right? Because the speed of progress with AI is quite incredible. So this is also has been like one of the core activities at quantum machines, right? So we started by developing this fundamental orchestration layer that runs the algorithm on the QPUs. But one of our main activities today is actually how do you connect this layer to other forms of computing in like those GPU clusters and CPUs and FPGAs and ASICs and so on and so forth. And so we released actually just March this year, about a month ago, we released what we call the Open Acceleration Stack. The Open Acceleration Stack is about a layer that can plug in on one side to any QPU, at the bottom, at the other side to any form of classical computing, right? Whether it's an NVIDIA GPU or an AMD processor, Intel processor, and so on and so forth. So that is indeed a critical milestone in the advancement of quantum.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, there's so much there that you've said that's helped me understand so much more about the sector and contextualize it. But also so many branches to build off on that because, you mentioned AI, and I don't want to compare the two, but it is kind of, as you mentioned, we are in the era, so to speak. We are in the moment.
Definitely.
It's tangible. People, we joked about talking with Claude and Gemini and all the LLMs, but that people are doing that, right? And they're interacting with these technologies and they're seeing what they can do. Quantum's a bit more abstract than that because it's not quite here, or it's a bit under the bonnet, so to speak. When you're building this infrastructure, what is telling you? What signals are you getting that you're on the right path? Because is it as abstract as we think, or are you folks closer to seeing what are some of the applications that can be achieved?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I wouldn't call it abstract so much. I think that there is a degree of uncertainty, right, in what we do, because indeed we are not sure yet what the first commercial use cases of quantum computers are going to be, right? I mean, sometimes people are asking me what is going to be kind of the killer app. So my answer to that is that this is not a good question, because it's a little bit like having asked, this is the recent example, like what is going to be the killer app of LLMs? Well, maybe there was a first kind of use case, but now, we're going to use it for everything, anything and everything, right? Like you would have asked, Alan Turing, right, that had invented the first modern computer, like what's it going to be good for, right? I mean, he would have not been able to foresee, the scope and of what computers do today. And I think that is the same for quantum computing. And so I think that it is not abstract. We know what we're going for. We believe that it's around the corner. We know what we need to build. But of course, there are some open questions, right? There are some uncertainties, like what are going to be the first use cases, or even like some things related to the hardware, like what kind of quantum processors are going to be actually useful. We have many types today.
What do you mean by what do you mean by just round the corner? Like, is that 1 year or 15 years? Because I know that Jensen Huang has said that large scale quantum is still 15 to 20 years away. So, but you guys are here now, right? With the 280 million in funding. So how does that disconnect happen? I mean, unless you're just planning for a very long runway. Talk me through how they might match, and what does round the corner mean to you?
So around the corner is, a couple of years away, I believe, to see the first instances of commercially viable quantum computers for end users, right? So, I mean, we could claim it's useful already because people are using it, right? If is being used, maybe it's useful. But the honest thing is that the honest fact is that people are using it for research that is not delivering positive ROI in the market, right? So,
Mm.
and so I think that we're a couple of years away from that, right? And if I'm wrong, I might be wrong. Let's say that I would be astonished if it's not within this decade. So saying that large computers are 15 years away, I don't know what large is. How do you quantify large? The GPUs that we have today, are they large? Are they small? Are they maybe in a Starbucks language? What do they call it? Like it's
Grande,
not
yeah. Vente.
one, yeah,
Vente
whatever.
CPUs.
So yeah. So I mean, at the end, like computing, as opposed to many other technologies, going back to my point earlier, will never stop, right? So we'll have big in 3 years, and then large, and then extra large, and then mega grande, and it will never stop, right? Computing never stops, right? I mean, we were so concerned about Moore's law getting to the end, but here we are. We keep up the progress. It doesn't stop, even within classical realm, right? Because now we make these bigger chips and we connect them faster and we find better architecture and better algorithms. So this never stops. So I would say even in 15 years, this is going to be super small relative to what we're going to have in 50 years.
And that's only going to increase or decrease. The rate of change will only get shorter as the amount of change increases or gets bigger. Bigger
I
in
guess the
terms of
things will only increase to a degree that, I don't know where this will diverge to.
right, because there are so many ways to measure bigger. Right, it's not just computational power. It's the economic impact, it's the social impact, it's the geopolitical impact that all of this is going to have. I mean, we're already seeing with those conversations are happening with AI already, and the kind of more less technical conversations surrounding the impact of these kinds of things. Can you even begin to imagine some of those conversations with quantum? What like I can't. It sounds like it's kind of just like on a magnitude way bigger than what we're already seeing.
So yeah, so again, this will be something that changes over time, right? But before I answer that, I also want to add like another point to the previous question, because I think it's important for your abstract point, right? um, I think that also within quantum, there's also a specific difference to quantum machines, right? Because actually, since we developed this kind of orchestration platform that orchestrates algorithms on the QPUs, the fact is that anyone today who wants to develop and or deploy a QPU needs a platform like ours, or better, it needs specifically ours, right? If this organization wants to get the best results. So therefore, actually today we are a highly commercialized company, right? We have over 400 customers globally, right? And we have significant revenues for a company at our stage. And so actually, while many quantum companies are raising massive amounts of money for basically stories, we also deliver numbers. So we are a very commercial company.
Can you share some of those numbers or not?
Of course not. Of course not.
I had to ask. I had to ask.
You had to ask. That's your job, right? Uh, so I think that for your question now. So I think that we'll really have to build it to know for sure, right? There are some computations that we know are going to run, but again, I think that this is a little bit like not having been able to really foresee what humanity is going to use computing for. Classical computing, specifically, any computer since the invention of the computer, and we're seeing the live examples these days. No one could foresee the use of LLMs on GPUs. No one. And Basically, there are a few examples that we're aware of, but I won't be surprised if we will find others that will dwarf those at the end of the day, right?
Can you share
And
some
those,
of those examples that
yeah.
you're already seeing?
So the example that we're not seeing, we're anticipating.
Anticipating,
Anticipating,
sorry, pardon me.
right? So the most famous example is an algorithm that is called Shor's algorithm. It's quite famous for those who are from the kind of computing field. And basically, what it can do is it can factorize large numbers, right? So factorize means, if I give you the number 21, then you would tell me 3 and 7. So that means factorizing, so finding the prime numbers of this number. But if I give you a very large number, I don't know, 21 million, blah, 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 actually, you will be unable to solve that problem, right? Even if I provide you access to all the computing power in the world, above a certain scale of number, that is an impossible task with classical computing. In fact, if you have access to all computers on the planet, if I give you a large enough number, it may just take you hundreds of thousands or millions of years, right? Which, of course, you won't have the patience to wait. But quantum computers, what we know, are going to be able to solve this problem very easily. So something that would take 100,000 years might be solvable at the scale of minutes. Now, the interesting thing here, the point to make here, is that quantum computers are not interesting, therefore, because they're going to take problems we solve today and are going to solve them faster. But rather, they will take problems today we deem as impossible and make them possible, right? That is a big difference. Now, James, you may say, okay, but who cares about finding the prime numbers of big numbers? Like, I couldn't care less, right? It's a useless problem. But it appears that if you have a machine that can do that, the other thing it can do as a consequence is break all the encryption that we're using in the world, or most of it, right? Including the what is used to encrypt our conversation right here, right now, and what you're using on a daily basis as you communicate with Gemini, or go on Facebook and or talk to your bank, or what the NSA is using. So that is one example, which is very well known and is kind of believed to be one of the ones that will deliver the biggest impact. Now, it is likely not going to be the first use case, but actually just a few weeks ago, a few researchers published a paper that says that we need much smaller quantum computers to do that than we thought we do. Actually, surprisingly small number. So we're kind of still digesting it. If they're right, well, we're going to see some big changes in the world in a few years' time.
Wow. Just as soon as everyone gets used to using LLMs, there'll be a whole other revolution taking place. Will it ever find, this is a question that just kind of came to me, would it ever find the last number of pi? Is there a last number of pi?
I do not know.
I guess we'll have to have another episode in a couple of years, and we'll have to meet and we'll have to discuss whether or not that was
Maybe you need a
discovered.
mathematician for that.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, it won't take thousands of years. That's very funny. I want to talk about something else as well that
By
I
the
know
way,
about you folks.
one of the claims as a result of the paper that was published a few weeks ago is that it will be able to decrypt the or kind of break the underlying encryption that is used for Bitcoin. So just that itself could be a big impact, by the way.
100%.
But
Yeah.
that is not an advice for your listeners to buy or sell Bitcoin. Yes.
I would never do that. I would never tell people to buy or sell any of the cryptos. But we have had episodes like that in the past that have touched on the very thing you've just mentioned, which is the perceived safety of holding assets in that type of asset class.
Very susceptible. Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about the idea that you folks are building at QM, which is like global labs and being and globalizing the work that you're doing. So you're an
Yes.
American company, but you kind of have things everywhere. You're building labs and R&D. Like, talk me through that exactly, what that looks like in terms of what you aim to achieve through growing like that, as opposed to focusing on one area or breakthrough.
Yeah. So, it's a question that I get a lot because as a company that is not yet like a corporate, right? We're now over 300 people, yet it's still a growth stage company, not a corporate scale company. People ask, why do you invest so much in setting up infrastructures beyond just like focusing on developing and selling products, right? And so the first answer is we do focus on developing and selling products. That is our focus. That is where the Pareto of our energy and kind of in focus and headcount is focused. However, we do have a vision for how future quantum data centers or data center hosting quantum should look like, and how they should be operated, and how they should make the computing resources accessible to users. We do have a vision for that, and instead of just kind of explaining this vision to people by conversations, we said, hey, why don't we just show it, set it up, right? And this was the original idea behind setting the first lab, which is the IQCC at in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and the second lab, which is now being set up in Chicago, Illinois, and others that will be set up in the future. So you see, if when you're in an emerging industry like quantum, where, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's so much uncertainty, right? It's not like established industries where there's this well-known way to do things, right? Many people make different claims, but we believe that since we are in this middle layer operating and connecting, right, operating QPUs and connecting to the rest of the resources and working with many different QPUs, different computing infrastructures and whatnot, then we believe that actually we humbly believe that we have a good overview of this industry and a very broad view on it. And so we actually think that our vision might be right. And so we said, okay, so we must set it up. We must show this to the world.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. I can't wait to see how it all goes and what's being built and seeing it, not just in Tel Aviv and Chicago, but all over the world.
Yes,
What's something about quantum that people typically misunderstand the most when you are pulling your hair out trying to explain what you're doing?
on the scientific level, so I think that one of the things is maybe what I related to earlier, which people think that quantum is just going to be this thing that we use for a handful of things, but no, the answer is that quantum is going to be a new infrastructure for computing, so it's going to be ubiquitous. The other thing, more on the scientific level, is that people think that it is like something to do with like the fact that qubits, quantum bits, can be in any combination of like can be like any number between 0 and 1, like the fact that like it can be 0. 0.1 and 0. 0.2 and 0.013572, like the fact that we have like so many numbers in between is like what gives rise to this massive computing power, and that is incorrect. It is not because of that. And I get that a lot. Like people think that, oh yeah, because you have like all of the numbers between 0 and 1, it's almost like silly. I want to say not silly. People are not scientists, but that is not the case. That is not the case. That is like the one misunderstood thing that I hear the most.
Interesting. Was there a moment when you thought this stuff that you're researching and building and selling, is there a moment when you thought it wasn't going to work?
It's not a question of like, we started the company because we got to good conviction that this is going to work, right? I mean, when we started doing research, when we started our careers as researchers, back then, quantum computing was considered by us, the scientists, as sci-fi, something we would almost ridicule if someone said that, oh yeah, quantum computing is going to happen at some point. Like, we would really consider it as silly. Um, but at some point, we got to the conclusion that the science and technology have gone beyond the threshold that we believe it is actually, there's no fundamental reason why we won't get there. Now, there is this uncertainty of, as I said earlier, we have our estimates for when it's going to happen, like commercially, but we might be wrong, right? So I could be questioning myself sometimes, am I right about this happening in X months or Y years? But I no longer question myself, is that really going to happen? For me, that is like, I'd be extremely shocked if that does not happen. Like, extremely shocked. I can keep saying it for a few more times if that's helpful, but I won't.
So not a question of if, but a question of when.
Correct.
That's wonderful. Thank you. That's we're getting to the end now of the conversation and some of the points that I wanted to discuss, and also, sadly, some of the time that we have today. Although I feel like we, in some areas, just scrape the surface of some of the exciting things that will come in the future. But I do want to, Itamar, end today how I often do, which is with a quick fire round. So I want to shoot some questions at you, and I want you just to not even think about it, just shoot back your response as quick as possible, and we'll try get some final insights out of you.
That is not my style.
Well, we'll try our hardest. What is the most overhyped thing in quantum right now?
There is a diversity of types of quantum processors. I could say that some of them specifically are overhyped.
What's the most underhyped thing?
The impact quantum computing is going to make in a few years' time. People do estimate that it will make big impact, but I truly think, sincerely, that any estimation we have today is still a big underestimation.
What's the moment you knew that QM would actually work?
An encounter with a customer, first year of the company, we kind of showed a very premature version of our demo, and he just finished till the end, and he said, guys, this is the dream.
What's the biggest mistake you made in your first year?
Biggest mistake in the first year. I think that in the very beginning, we were getting a lot of good traction from customers. And at some point, we said that we won't be able to deliver to more than a certain number. So we kind of slew down a little bit the sales efforts.
Final question. What do you wish journalists understood about quantum that they constantly get wrong, or don't appreciate, or don't understand?
Journalists.
And I'll be sure to pass on the message.
Maybe indeed the fact that there's nothing between quantum computing and sci-fi. This is just an irrelevant term.
Wow. Okay. I said that was my last question. I lied. I have one last question for you. What is the best
Go ahead.
way for everyone listening and watching today to get in touch with you or follow you or keep up to date with some of the things you folks are doing at QM?
So the best way is through LinkedIn. I think that QM's LinkedIn is quite active, and we report our progress. And so if you want to keep up with the progress, and the progress is fast, is very fast. So please feel free to follow me and or QM on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. I'll make sure to put the links there down at the bottom and where people can easily find them. Itamar, thank you so much for your time today. It was super interesting to learn all about, on my end at least, to learn all about this new and exciting area that seems like it's going to take off just as soon as the dust settles on this AI era that we all seem to be in. Really appreciated your time and insights today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, James. Thank you.